Alright, this is a quick video on a small painting I'm doing. This is an 8 by 10, I think. It's a portrait for some friends of mine. Kind of a story behind that, but they had this wonderful little baby, so I decided to surprise them with a little portrait. How this video is going to work is you will see the stages of development of painting. This is just one way to paint portraits. They're not all run through like this. This is just one method I use for it. Right here, this is not a finished portrait. This is a likeness working toward a portrait, and we'll talk about that later. This is actually more of an underpainting than getting anywhere close to being final, but again, we're just at a certain stage right now. At the end of the videos, I'll show you what it looks like step by step, and then we'll get a better idea of progressions. The video editing isn't very good, and neither is the sound right now. I'm kind of in a makeshift studio. It's going to take time to get this new one set up, so that's just what it is for now. Hope you guys enjoy. Quick note on gesso. Gesso was originally developed to create a primer between canvas and the paint. What happens is you get canvas and it has nothing to stick to. So you need a ground and you need glue to help those things adhere. So originally, paintings, when they were done, rabbits were boiled down and the remains, their bones and everything, and they would create a sizing, what they call it, and put it on the canvas. That gave your paint something to grab onto and create a surface area. Now we use what's called gesso. We can use acrylic gessos. I have one here. This is black, which is somewhat rare, but this is an acrylic round versus rabbit glue, so it gives us a much better idea of what today's standards are. But works just as well. So when you put this on the canvas, what happens is it gets a little tooth to it. You can hear it go. There's a little bit of tooth on there. It makes it almost feel like it's a little bit sandy. It's very important that we have that on there. But you'll find this other canvas that I'm about to demonstrate had a different type of gesso I've never heard of before. Everybody wants to come out with the most miraculous thing on the world. It's been fine for 50 years. And oh my God, now they've got this new titanium gesso or some BS. It's all the same. You need something to protect the canvas. You need something to take your paint and make it stick. It's already been worked out. That said, here we go. Okay, so you can see right here, triple coated with acrylic titanium gesso. I don't even know what the hell that is. Acrylic titanium gesso, 9-ounce prime weight for use with oil or acrylic paints. So you can buy these canvases. They're almost all pre-primed. And even though they are, with the exception of the linen, maybe you would ought to be able to jump right off into that, but all these need to be primed again. They either never put enough or it's too thin for purpose. There's always an issue with it. Now, I've not done a portrait in a while. In fact, I haven't really painted for quite a while. I forgot actually to gesso this canvas. And typically when you gesso it, you tone it. And anyway, I failed on both accounts. I'm no good at much. So here we are trying to recover some sort of dignity about myself. So here's the kid. And what I got so far is really just blocking in. You'll say, damn, that's pretty close, but it's actually closer to being a likeness. When you work with paint, it's a lot like working with clay. All right, when you take a lump of clay and you decide, I want to make a baby or a face or whatever you want to do, the very first thing you do is grab a lump of clay, you toss it on the table. Painting's no different, and I'll show you some examples of this in the beginning, how it started versus how it looks now, and then in another video I'll do a painting of a girl who is quickly becoming YouTube's hottest sensation. In upcoming videos, I'll do portraits, and we'll go from the ground up. But here I want to take you from just a sense of purpose to finish, because I think a lot of people can kind of get to this stage and they're like, how do I get to a finish? You find yourself with the ability, you can come to a likeness, but you can't pull off a full portrait. And there's a really fine line into making that happen. And we'll talk about that in a few seconds here. So first I'll talk about what I'm working with here. I'm using acrylic paints. These are a combination of Liquitex and golden acrylics. I think they make probably the best paints in the world. Liquitex is the largest producer of paint in the world, and they have a formula which works. Even their cheap paints side by side have a good pigment load to them. The Liquitex Basic series compared to the High Viscosity series, honestly, I mean, there's a marked difference, but if you had to buy the dirtiest, cheapest paint you could ever buy, you said, man, I'm a dirt poor artist, I can't afford any paint, get Liquitex Basics. I think you would really serve yourself well to get Liquitex Basics. And secondarily, for brushes, if you need a cheap set of good brushes, Dick Blick sells a golden Taklon set. They also sell a white Taklon set. And basically those are just, it's a set of brushes like this. I think there's always been 15 in the particular set I'm talking about. It's under 20 bucks. I think when I started painting in the early 2000s, it was, what the hell, it was like $8 for 15 brushes. These dirt cheap brushes. And maybe it's 12 bucks now for 15 of them or something now, but they're gold and they're white Taklon. They come in a set. And you want the set of mixed rounds and flats. And what they give you are a set of brushes that for several years you can just beat the hell out of for next to nothing until you learn how to paint. Or if you just want a good set of brushes to work with acrylics or oils, they're stiff, but they still have enough body, or they have enough give to them to hold paint and transfer it. As far as a good, cheap working brush, they're not bad. When you're ready to step up to a more serious brush and you want to spend some real money, like piss your money away money, then you get Winsor & Newton Gold Scepters. And those have probably been renamed at some point, but those are the highest quality brushes. They're actually marked as a watercolor brush. And so already you'll get a sense of the level of control that you need with an acrylic paint to work with that brush. Now, I'm not saying you can't paint any texture with it, but you need to have a certain viscosity worked out in order to make that flow appropriately and make those brushes work to their utmost capacity. And it is very possible. I mean, I'll damn near paint the whole thing for you. So keep that in mind. That said, my palette is very limited when I do portraits. At least when I get the basic sketch for portraits. This palette that I've used here is a more experienced palette. This is something that my teacher taught me. It's a very simple palette. It doesn't consist of many colors. There's only one new one on here since he and I were working together, and it's only not a recommendation from a different artist, and it panned out well. So don't ever be afraid to take new advice outside of what you learned. So we'll zoom in here and take a look. These are all been worked out a little bit, but in the middle here, I like to keep a couple piles of white, and that way I can drag stuff off into the shadow side or drag it off into the light side or wherever I want to. So I keep the white always centered. Um, but if you start up here at the top of the colors, I have a more vibrant yellow. This is a Naples yellow. This is raw sienna. This is cad red light or cadmium red light. We call it cad red light for short. Cadmium is a metal. Here's cad red dark. And this is transparent red iron oxide. This palette is what's called a stay wet palette. There's a sponge, that's this yellow thing over here. Oops. And on top of it is a piece of paper which is permeable. So you get the sponge wet. This paper, you actually cook it. You can boil it for 10-15 minutes and it becomes translucent and it allows the moisture to seep up through the paper. It's very wonderful. Whoever thought of this, I hope to God they're a millionaire now because acrylics dry out really, really quick. And what this does is allow the moisture to seep up through and keep those paints relatively wet throughout the entire process. And then over here, I just keep a handy dandy spray bottle. Anything cheap you get at a whatever hair salon, Avon. And then I have this little whole bean bottle here. This is if I'm mixing paints and I want to put a drop right on and mix it up with a palette knife or something. This gives me a little bit more control with the water where I put it. You'll see me use that a little later when we do color charts. Now for brushes, like I said, I use these Taklons here. I didn't really bring out the good ones yet, but to give you an idea, you start out with this big thing here, and then you kind of have to work your way out the big parts of the painting. So what I would do is I would get some basic color in, and I would get the shape of a head and the shape of the hat. I'd work all that in, get the hat going, and then I'd start to develop the fur of this and the blanket a little bit. And then what happens is you find yourself working with this big brush, putting in all these big blocks of color, and then you get to the point where you're like, damn, if I take this brush and go like this, I'm gonna wipe that whole eye out, or I'm gonna ruin whatever I just worked on. And that's just because you've outworked its purpose. It's only good for blocking in large areas, and so I move to the next smallest brush, which is in my case this is a 1/4 inch flat. And then I got in and I worked that as many spots as I could, but again I get to the point where you start to obliterate every single thing you work on because this brush is now only capable of these big, huge changes, you see. It's too big to get in here and deal with these minute changes that we have to make this look real. And in order to start seeing the finer and finer detail, we almost have to pick up a smaller brush. So we're going to switch from this brush, to this here. This is a number 1 or a number 2 round. It's a very simple brush, and what we're going to do is work on the drawing of this painting. What we've done thus far is just get a rough idea. We're starting to collect the idea of what this child is. This is the underpainting. This is almost the skeletal structure of this child. It's not quite. There's a couple things that need to be adjusted. We'll talk about what those are in a second and how we're going to go about making that correct so that it becomes a dead-on likeness for her. And then the second thing we'll talk about is color. Color is always last. So if you see this and the colors are off, don't worry about it. Those will always get altered at the end. This is just an underpainting. In fact, when I'm finished with this underpainting and I've got this drawing more nailed down and we've got things set exactly where we want them, what I'm going to do is put a glaze over this entire thing. When that glaze goes over here, it's going to basically make this atonal, for lack of a better word. It's going to set everything back. It's going to make it atonal. And then I will build the new painting off of there. And there's a couple ways you can do that. And we'll talk about those later. But that's the goal for now. So let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Now, what's the good? The good is we have a general idea of subject matter. Right off, if this was hung on a wall and you were walking up to it from a distance, you'd be like, oh my God, it's a baby and some type of blanket or whatever. That's your very first impression off the top of your head. It ain't a house, it ain't a car, you can see distinctly what it is. So right out, we've captured the essence of our subject. But as you move in, we start to see small things happening that we need to correct. And again, we don't want to look at color whatsoever right now. In fact, color at this stage should be the least relevant thing into your mind. Color should be the very, very last consideration. So we're gonna look at it from this angle. Now I constantly flip these around and put them on their sides, straight up and down, because I want to always have in my mind a fresh view of this drawing. I don't ever want to get used to seeing what I've done. I want to see what needs to be corrected, what doesn't need to be corrected. And right out, I'm seeing some value issues here. There's a lack of transitional development between the height of this cheek here and the puffiness of the cheek here. So what happens is your eyeball is a little sphere and it sits on this ledge, which is your cheek, and then your cheek bulges out. But there's a transitional part right there, and she's missing that. And then we need to get this nose softened so that it builds out and there's a evincing of flesh. Down here, we've lost the dark value in the eyelid. The nose needs to be remodeled such that there aren't bullet holes looking up into it. The mouth needs to be retooled. The philtrum isn't bad, but it needs more distinction, and it also needs to be. Her face is angled just a little bit like this, just a touch, and that philtrum needs to be. See that it's not really reflected in the drawing. Over here, you can see that philtrum right there, and then mine is not quite there. It's almost there, but it's just a hair of a degree off. And it's those little small things that are going to make the difference. You'll see, I'll start making those little small incremental touches, and this thing is going to come together in seconds. It's going to come together so fast, you're not going to, it's like Donald Trump fast. All right, and then we have this fur hat in here. This has to be developed. Now I put these darks in here, and I'm hoping that when I get these grays and blues on top, and these golds, and the intermediary browns, that it really makes this thing sing, and I think it will. I think it's what makes this thing look warm, is it has all these nice warm reds and yellows in there. Kind of makes this child's face perk up and reflect some of that color back into his face. You can see some of that yellow in there. It's not very intense, but it's in there, and it's developable. And then I want to talk somewhat about the structure of this blanket and her whole thing. So this actually has a ton of good movement in it. Just this whole picture does, honestly. It's really what drew me to the painting. There's such dramatic movement in this thing. There's little subtle things that you wouldn't really notice, but I'll just show you right now. First of all, she's got this hat, which is just like this big old halo, and gives her sort of the angelic vibe, but it just, this fur is here, and then it comes down here, and then it flows down here, and it points back here, and it's down here, and I've kind of indicated that. underneath wise, as far as direction, you could say I came down here and I kind of given that some sort of gesturing. And then underneath that fur is she has some type of wool liner, and we're going to develop that later. It needs to come down a little lower. You see, it actually comes down to the bottom of the filter almost, maybe even a third down. So that's pretty short. And what that'll do, actually, I'll do it right now, and I'll show you the dramatic difference that even something small like that will have a major effect. And my gosh, that thing must come down to like right here. It goes up into some curvy thing right there. A little bit. And then there's that blue behind it. You just see that was being premature. Or are we speaking the Queen's English? And I feel like there's something developing there. I gotta open that up a little bit, I think. Is there something like that? This is probably severe there, so I'm gonna just knock that back with my hand a little bit. Well, that was just something I just saw real quick that I wanted to. So right now you're saying, well, this looks flatter than this. Actually, this has more modeling than this. But what's happened here? Children, they don't have a lot of facial structure. Their bones have just formed, and so their faces are actually a lot flatter until they chubby up. And this baby hasn't quite reached that stage of being chubby yet. And so when the light hits her, it's kind of like blip, and it just hits everything at once, and then you kind of get some rounding here. And so it's going to be highly important that we reconcile the drawing before we do any type of color modeling. Otherwise, we'll be in a real situation. That said, there's not a ton left of the drawing that has to be nailed down. That color there. So now see, we were up on it, we pull back again, and it's funny. You still have a sense of this being a baby, but now you have a much more clear idea of the approach you need to take to finish this painting and make it more accurate. And we're not bad. We're not far from the finish line, but it's these stages here that are going to become highly critical, and how we pay attention, how we administer critical brushstrokes. Once this drawing gets nailed, and we glaze that painting, we knock that painting back, and we go to put our new colors on top of there, and begin to get very serious about this thing, we have to be dead on, because at that point, every single stroke, it has to be flawless. If we make one mistake with color, in my opinion, the whole thing will be ruined. So let us be careful. Let us be good draftsmen and get our things going. So back to the structure of this painting. I get real philosophical sometimes. Back to the structure of this painting. There's a lot of movement. You can see her body is tucked under here. Maybe these are her feet or her knees or something are kicking up in the front. And you can kind of see I've indicated that here. It's very important that I get this line right here correct. If I don't get that line correct, then we're going to be in for a hell of a situation. We're not going to be able to replicate the face, because I need some of those movement of line to make that face sit back the way it is. And we'll talk a little bit about that. The composition of this is always redirecting the viewer to a state of action until, okay? You're you're always in here moving around, flipping about. The fur's going, it's doing X, Y, Z. The blanket, you get to the blanket, it's flowing and moving and waving, and this whole painting is just doing all this stuff until, and inside of this whirlwind of activity, there's this little face peering up at you, this little angelic face peering up at you. And so in the early stages of the painting, it's important to me to capture the movement. I know the drawing of the face is going to get nailed. I know the colors are going to get nailed, but if we don't capture the movement of this painting, it's not going to be worth shit. You might as well not be an artist. You might as well not. Don't waste the painting's time. Let's do what we can do to make forward progress on this thing. Okay, so let's get back to this drawing. I'm going to point out some things, and then we'll start making a list of corrections that have to happen. So right out, it's not bad. Okay, the eyes are not far off. The left eye is closer to being done than the right eye. But let's break down the elements of each and what can be better. So the first question we need to ask ourselves is the line drawing correct? And we can say with some degree of certainty that this isn't bad. It can be better, but it's not bad. So what I want to do is take you through what I see, and then you'll see some stuff at home too. And in your mind, you should always be making mental corrections. But we'll just go through from left to right. And what I always do is start at a fixed point on the painting and the drawing. So in the case of this, for me, it's going to be between the eye and the edge of this hat. Obviously, the edge of the hat where the face meets. If I put a little cross mark right there, where the edge of the eye and the hat meet, really give us an idea of a starting point. And already it tells me that my hat is a little off. On here, this hat comes down to directly the bottom of that eye. And my hat is up about, I don't know, a third of a centimeter, maybe a couple millimeters, something like that. So I won't pay too much attention to color right now, but I'll go down here and it will make me a little hat color. Grab some of this transparent red iron oxide. I'll grab some of this cat red. And then I'll grab some of that blue. Set it back in shadow. And then I will get in here. And then what really happens is her hat, it looks like it goes back like that. That hat kind of has more of a curve to it like that, I would say. I think this whole time I may have been flipping away at that thing and I may have lost it. Huh. Well, I guess we'll see in a minute, because if I set these darks in, it isn't right, then we'll be SOL, won't we? So I'll just give a little. Huh. Yeah, mine's okay, so it's not bad. Mine's leaning a little heavy. I'm going to scrub some of that out. See if I can't fake a recovery there. So not too bad. I suppose I could. It's probably closer to that right there. See that? I'm still off at the top, I know, but what happens, I think, is it really comes up to here. And then this had a much more severe entry vertically. See that? All right. So we're going to start finding those little small things like that. And I don't want to work too far away from, remember, we're starting at that landing point there at point 0. So, tell you what, if I put a little doer right there, like I said, that's where we start, right there. It'll give us a heck of an idea of what's right and wrong. So. All right. Actually, I want to go like this because there's a little series of highlights in here I want to try to develop. And since we're over in this area, we might as well make a concerted effort. So we have a little type of thing there. And there's a lot of. This brush is almost too big for what I want to do. I'll tell you what, I'm gonna work off that. I'm gonna come off of this eye because I find that I'm making these big old drastic changes here and I can't quite pull it off. So I'm gonna get on this nose for a little bit and see if I can't flesh her out. Fucking. Oh, me too. There you go. I'll give you a better idea of the whole picture there. All right, so I'm gonna start getting in here now. If you can see these colors a little better. All right, so I'm gonna start fleshing out this nose a little bit. A little shadow here. I'm trying to do. Turn this way. I can't get the cooperate. So tape in a minute. Tape. I paint sometimes and just shut up, so you have to deal with that. I tell you, the left side of that face is really coming together. So I'm just going to play with that mouth a little bit. Just trying to push it this way. See, your face is like looking this way. So I'm trying to Exactly. Not terrible. Shade that frown. chin's still a touch off, but you can see it's starting to pull it a little bit. You get the shapes off a little bit. Yeah, I lost it. Oh, something like that. Okay, we'll stop there. We made pretty good progress, even though, as you've seen, I talked more than I painted. We only painted for a short amount of time, but you can see from the start of that session to the finish of that session how much closer the face is getting. And that's kind of how it develops, painting in this style, which is from back to front. And you start with nothing. You see, we started with a simple line drawing and worked up from there. And that's just kind of how it gets. So we'll talk about what the next video will be about and how I can improve upon what we have and how we can start to nail this finally. So kind of what happened is if you look at the first drawing, or from when we started till now, you can see her face is finally starting to look like it's turning this way. It's starting to rotate. Well, it's starting to rotate with the light because I'm starting to emphasize light direction now. I'm starting to get closer to value control. And that'll really happen once we get to dialing in colors. I think it's going to be a very nice painting. And what's going to be hard about this painting, maybe the most difficult thing of all, is finding a frame for it. Let's look at what we have. Just give a final rundown here. I think once we develop the filter more and the mouth, I think that will start to set the rest of the face in. There's a couple shadow colors in the eye that need to be put in, and I think that that'll bring out. And then when I get more specific with the eyes, we'll start to see a little more progress there as well. What I've done is just kind of blob in the thought of an eye, or the thought of her eye, since it's closer. Maybe that's a good way to reference the term likeness, the thought of somebody versus the essence. Anyway, you see it's getting closer and closer. One thing I'm going to really work on is fleshing out the nose. As you can see, it looks like she has a couple of shotgun holes there. We'll take care of that, and then we'll flesh out the bridge. In doing so, it'll really develop the inside of this eye at the same time. Every time we affect one thing, it simultaneously affects the adjacent area. So we'll start to see a lot of changes all around. And that's kind of why you could see if I touch the brush here and there a few times. The reason I do that is because I see the same color or the same value there. And when that happens, if I see one here, I look at my brush and I say, where else can this paint go? Well, some can go up here. And you saw a lot of that when I was painting. You'll see it a lot when we really nail down the color palette, which I'll give a brief talk about. But first, we need to talk about this hat. I am not a Detroit fan. Now, this is a true story. Random fact. When I was a kid, I think I was 14, maybe 15. I used to work at the Pontiac Silverdome through a temp agency.
Just probably tearing down some of the inside of the structure.
They're all saying that bitch ain't coming down.
And they would have us clean up the Silverdome. And it was one of the greatest jobs I had as a kid, honestly. After the games, we'd go clean up. And then before the games, we would see setup and how it worked. And I met all the Detroit Lions and all the players back then. And they would give me stuff, gloves and hats and shoes. You know, I didn't shoe that big. And I just left all that shit there. My mom, when I was a kid, she was a waitress at a restaurant for a small period of time. And all the Detroit Pistons would come up there after their games. And they would give her cards and, signed cards, and she'd bring them home. And I just give them to my friends. That fucking Grant Hill, who gives a fuck about him, right? So I grew up around the Detroit sports scene. That said, Thank you, Brett Favre.
I'm getting a bit full. I think I had my lunch too early. Taurus. Taurus's birthday. English says she's middle. You think so? Why do you think that, English? Richard said I pulled up Pluto and saw the ad for Titanic and was thinking we were going to watch that for a minute. Yeah, I thought about Titanic, but I wasn't sure if you guys in here would enjoy Titanic.